Good morning, everyone. We are live this morning. This is the Talkwards. My name's Nat Rich, as you may know, and we are live on I Am Sound Academy Radio. And this morning, I am joined by these two fabulous guests. I have Jules, who I met very recently at Medicine Festival. Jules Mueller is the founder of Sex Club, which teaches people. They do courses and workshops on developing your sexuality, so you can have conversations verbally and show up as your beautiful self and be happy with who you are sexually. We also then have Josh, who I actually stalked and found on LinkedIn. And Josh is a resilience coach and doing some fabulous stuff with kids as well. And it's basically about being the best versions of yourself. So I've got these two guests that are doing the best they can with themselves. And I thought I'd bring them on. And we've got Charles coming on as well a little bit later, hopefully, if he's done. He's videoing this morning or doing something. But Charles will be coming back on, bringing some of the fun as he usually does. But today, the show is all about what the difference is between sex and intimacy, because they are not one in the same. And we also have this going live from our app this morning. So if you're watching from our app, I was basically busy working behind the scenes yesterday, making everything work. So welcome for joining us. And if you do have anything to say, you can just send us a message through the shout box in the app. And I will hopefully, if I'm not too busy chatting, I will see those messages and I will read them out. And if you want to make a comment on YouTube, I'll get the notifications for that too. So first and foremost, how are you both? I'll stop chatting. How are you, Jules? You good?
I always find it interesting answering a question of how I am, because I can't say I'm good or I'm fine, because there's a multitude of things ranging in me. So I'll try to make it short. I'll just come out of a 10-day artist residency, and I've been sick for half of it, which brought up so many insecurities in who I am as a person if I can't trade my vibes and my creativity for love, apparently, which I need to validate myself. And I feel I disintegrated and reassembled myself. And now I feel a little bit fragile in this new state.
Well, do you know what? I love the honesty of that. And that's what this is about. And it's about not always saying that, yeah, I'm fine or I'm okay. It's literally about being your authentic self. And I think you've just smashed that. So thank you very much for sharing. And Josh, how are you this morning, my love?
Well, I'm under a little bit of pressure, aren't I, now, to give a nice full answer, as I just sort of said when we were speaking off air to Jules as well. But there's probably a little bit of nerves in me, actually, which doesn't normally happen when I'm coming on these kind of things. But I think, I often come on to speak about subjects that I feel that I'm very full in the knowledge of. But today I feel like I'm going to be doing some exploration stuff as well. So not to mention the fact it's me and two ladies in here as well. There's probably something in that. So look, I'm probably a little bit nervous, but also excited as well to have the conversation. I love having conversations in which I can explore and try and learn from. So I guess that kind of sums up how I'm feeling.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you for your honesty and about your nerves. We will go steady with you. I said before, I don't bite, and I don't know if Jules does, but only if you ask nicely. So it is all about, this is the whole thing about the Talkwards. It's awkward conversations about things that truly matter, and not everything is comfortable to speak about. Things can be quite nerve-wracking, and we do have a habit of just going, yeah, okay, I'm all right, and when we're not okay. And I think there's no bigger time to talk about these things than now in 2020, because I would be pushed if someone was okay without anything. I'd be thinking, are they lying to me? Because everything's going to the extreme at the moment. Everything's, been brought up. The pressure is there in many ways, whether it's financial, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with your family, your time, yourself. Everything about our lives is changing rapidly, and staying in the moment and being honest with our feelings is one of the ways that we can truly ground ourselves. And I feel that having a conversation about sex versus intimacy is quite important right now, because we can't all have sex all the time. There are times where we do need to be intimate with our friends and our loved ones, and going into other ways of communication, especially if we're in lockdown and things like that. So I thought this would be a really good subject. Jules, you are probably, I'm going to say, the expert on this conversation in terms of the work that you do. So can you, I know you've been with us before on the show, but can you explain a little bit in detail about a kind of experience that somebody could have at the sex club with you, and actually what that entails, so we can give it a little bit more of a leeway going into the conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be a little bit careful with I wouldn't call myself an expert, because what Sex Club is really about is that we are all experts in our own right, as in, like, no one has figured out anything about sex or intimacy really, and we've just all learned something along the way. And within Sex Club, it's very much like to have this inquiry towards ourselves, like, what do I know, what can I find out about myself, sharing this with others, and then really, like, yeah, just piecing together the wisdom that we all really inherently have, and learn from each other. So yeah. And in terms of, I guess, sex and intimacy, what Sex Club is very much about is just being honest, and honest towards ourselves in the first place. Like, what do I want? What do I need? And intimacy, like, at the core of intimacy is really, yeah, being truthful in the moment, at any moment, and exposing that truth to another person, which creates intimacy. And our need for intimacy and sex is actually different. It's a different need. They can be fulfilled together if the sex has, like, physical and emotional closeness, but it's not a necessity. And I guess what often happens is, like, if we can't distinguish, do I need intimacy right now, or, am I really just horny? But if I want intimacy and then have sex, and I don't get the intimacy from the sex, then I guess that's where that feeling of, like, emptiness or disappointment can come from at the end of a sexual encounter.
Well, it's really important. A lot of people do have that lack of intimacy, and I don't think they've been able to actually put the words or put the name on that feeling of getting their needs met, but then still coming away feeling like they're empty in some way. So it's a really good explanation that you've just gone on. So, Josh, I'm going to take it over to you. Do you feel that, coming from the male perspective this morning, do you feel that regarding sexual encounters and stuff, that there's a lot of misunderstanding between sex and intimacy from a male perspective? Do you think that's something that we can expand on? What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I think there's huge misunderstanding, particularly from a male's perspective, certainly in terms of the way in which we're introduced to it, by the way, when we're younger. I think I would firstly start by expanding a little bit on what Jules said as well. I think we talked already a little bit about authenticity, and I think authenticity for me at the core is understanding what I'm feeling, knowing what I need as a result of what I'm feeling, and then making sure that I can communicate that within my relationships and my activities, right? I think particularly men, I'm speaking from a man, and I used to be a young boy's point of view. We are only really introduced to sex through pornography, right? When I was younger, that was an old VHS that was either passed about or found down the park. but actually,
someone's under the bed.
Yeah, exactly, right. But actually, in today's world, it's continuous, repeated access from a very young age via the internet, right? And I think because we're introduced to it, or because young boys are introduced to it in that way, they're actually only introduced to it as a tool of escapism, where in which the sexual partner is only really seen as an object. So and then because you have, from a man's perspective, men are generally speaking not very good at exploring their emotions and having the kind of difficult conversations that are needed. I think often young boys don't get to sit down and have a real meaningful, deep conversation with anyone, but primarily their dads. They don't get to have that conversation about what the reality is and what it really looks like. And so what I think happens is it starts off with a bit of a porn addiction in that young age, and then eventually that will transfer into starting to have sex at whatever age that might be, right? But it continues, for me, I believe that it continues actually to be a form of escapism, having that need of I don't want to be present right now. I don't want to be here, in the same way that we would use anything else, alcohol, gambling, love, whatever it might be. And then that becomes problematic because it's nearly always actually separate. It's a separate need, like Jules was saying, and actually never ever meets that need. And I think single men and men in long-term relationships can find themselves caught up in having lots of sex and never having that need met, and not understanding where the disconnect happens.
Yeah, it's very important to know that there's that difference and to be able to establish the understanding of that, because otherwise you are chasing something ineffectively and it can become quite an addiction. So from your perspective, Jules, on this, there's obviously a lot of you know many people that are out there doing conscious men's circles and conscious women's circles that are allowing for the space of this conversation to happen, but in a kind of an environment in where you aren't necessarily privileged to such an amazing group of people all talking about sex and so on, from like maybe sitting with your friends, how do you think someone could start a conversation around the difference between sex and intimacy? What do you think would be a few things that people could, a few tips, as it were, if they actually thought, I actually want to have a talk about this, but who can I talk to? What would you say that a few tips are for them to kind of start engaging in that conversation, other than finding the person that's probably willing to talk about that stuff first and foremost? But what would you suggest?
Yeah, good question. I guess it takes a lot of courage if one is not used to talking about it, and often if we bring it up with our friends or our lovers, it's a quite high stakes environment. So often when you just said like women's and men's circles, or any kind of like environment where it's like a held group space that is very therapeutic but not therapy. That's a space where that can be brought up and can be practiced, because to feel what we actually need is like emotional safety or a safety of environment. Because I do remember when I was younger, there was a lot of like banter and like really, just making fun of each other. And it's really hard to be emotionally vulnerable in such an environment where I'm going to be ripped to pieces by my mates. Yeah. So it really takes, I guess, another community where I can be myself. I can hear other people being vulnerable and speaking about their feelings. So it's like, oh, okay, this is actually okay. Other people feel the same. And then I feel safer actually bringing it up with people where it's maybe new for them. Because it is new for a lot of us, because most of us haven't been raised to like talk about our feelings and saying like, hey, it's okay. And it takes like, it's a skill to learn for sure.
Do you feel that there's a need for like a set of steps that could maybe, like sometimes when you read in a magazine or when you read online, it's like these 10 steps will help you reach orgasm or whatever it is. Do you think that it would be useful if there was some kind of literature or guide that was made that could be shared on a free basis, that could take people to say, make sure you're choosing, the person's available. Are they willing to talk about their fears? Is the room are you in the right location? That kind of thing, like a step-by-step guide. Because I think a lot of this information out there and booklets that are out there could actually just be super useful, just to be able to help them create the right space, because it's always about set and setting when you're having these conversations as well, like the timing and the place. No one wants to talk about it when it's when you're driving down the road and you're stuck in traffic. It's probably not the best time to open up a conversation about this, because it might be quite frustrating. But do you think there's a need for that kind of stuff, or maybe that maybe there is somewhere out there that does that? Have you come across anything with information like that?
I mean, there are thousands of like articles about intimacy. It's really easy to just like look up, and also a lot of books around it. So it's definitely worth it. I think like a first step is just just doing a little bit of research online. It's non-committal, and just, like diving into it, what it means. And then Josh and I spoke just before the show about like, it just takes a commitment to like really like, am I willing to look at myself, and am I willing to look at the parts in me that are really hurt, like my inner child, all of the things that my inner child, the love that is not received, all of the patterns that I have from there. Am I really willing to look at it, and am I willing to also accept that I'm not perfect and that there is something that I have to work on. And at the same time, though, there's nothing to fix. It's more like accepting ourselves with everything that we are. And maybe, Josh, you want to like add something on that, but because you really explained it really nicely earlier.
Look, I loved what you said there, particularly about the inner child stuff, and you know, that full acceptance of who we are. The real healing work is not about becoming a better person or thinking that I need to change or improve who I am. It's about peeling back the layers to the acceptance of who I've always been, right? And kind of having the ability to hold space for myself and who I am. To kind of bring it back to Nat's original question as well. From a male's perspective, at 18 years old, I was never having a proper conversation about it anywhere. And by the way, I can't think of a way that I could have. I could have done research online, but my research wouldn't have been the best research, right? Because it would have been supplemented by what I was hearing when I first started going in the pubs. And that's no different, by the way, at the age that I'm at now. I'm 33 now. If I went in a pub and listen to the way that people are talking about it, right? I'm not getting any useful information. So it's really on that front. I mean, look, I'm somebody who is on my own healing journey now. I'm trying to explore who I am, right? So it's different. I'm kind of in these circles. I can find these circles. I can meet people like you two. I can meet people like Jules who are kind of talking about this stuff in a way that's very much needed. How, as a young man, could I have found myself having those conversations? I think personally, in the society in which we live in Western culture, they're not there. So for me, it becomes about what conversations are we having at school, right? What are we doing for young people when we look at sex education? Now, the issue that you've got is that, I'm talking in England anyway, in the UK, we're terrified of this. We're terrified of the conversation.
It's so prudish, it's ridiculous.
Right? It's ridiculous. And the sex education at the moment, predominantly in schools, starts way too late, you know, in terms of proper stuff, because young boys are watching porn way before they're sitting in a class and having this conversation about how sex is this reproductive thing that we do as a way of reproducing, right? Reproducing. So we need to try and go way beyond that in schools. I think we're probably quite a way off of that at the moment. So it becomes really, really difficult. You know, I'll tell you now straight, the conversations within the average man's circles, in the average part of society, some of the things that are being, you know, the conversations that are being had would actually be promoting rape and non-consensual sex, right? To the same thing, by the way. So actually, if we actually look at it for what it really is in mainstream society, if I can call it that, it's dangerous. It's hella dangerous. And the type of conversations that are needed when I was in my early 20s, late teens, was so far away from anywhere that I was moving, any space that I was moving in, that it is hugely problematic in that sense. Yeah.
It's something that, like you've just said, the actual average conversation that's going on around sex at the moment, I recognize this quite a lot, and I've said it a few times, and I say it as an answer to one of the things that's going around at the moment. And I don't know if you remember, but when Trump came into presidency, he said there was that article about him saying that he grabbed women by the pussy, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it!" You know, everyone hated Trump. And at the time, I'm thinking, nearly every male I know that has banter has said something worse at some point, but also the point that there's a number of WhatsApp group messages that people are on that send the most grotesque stuff around women and the derogatory behavior that men have around women and the way that these women are portrayed just on their WhatsApp groups to their mates. And so when people have said things to me about Trump, not that I'm a massive supporter in Trump, that's not what I'm saying, but it's to counteract what people were saying about how gross that comment was. I kept taking it back to think of the WhatsApp groups that are out there at the moment. Think of the stuff that people send around and they share in the aim of humor. It's disgusting And you think, oh yeah, it's funny, it's only a bit of banter, but it's what that's doing to you on a regular basis, especially if there's like 10 or 12 guys on a WhatsApp group. You're constantly being fed the idea that it's okay to treat women in this way, or it's not just about women, it's okay to just have sex in this meaningless way. And I feel that that's something that when I've said it to guys, there's been instant faces of like, oh, yeah, because they have to then take the ownership that it's not just Trump that's the person that's saying that. Actually, it's also you too. And I'll never, make it into an argument, but it's this projection that we have on other people doing things in society, and we look at them in certain ways and we say, oh, they're not doing this, or cancel this or cancel that. But it's actually a lot of the intimacy requires you to take that looking glass in and to actually look back at yourself and to say, where have I displayed this behavior? How have I done this? What can I do within my world? Because a lot of people think, oh, it's all right for everyone else, it'll solve itself. But a lot of people have problems that they daren't talk about, that they would never in a million years share with anyone else. And this is what we mean by intimacy. And like you said in the beginning, Jules, it's that speaking to yourself, like owning your truth in that moment. Just by when we said to you this morning, you could have said, yeah, I'm fine, but that wasn't the answer, because that wasn't your truth. You don't feel that way. So there's no point in lying just to be socially accepted on the call or even before the call. And I think a lot of people out there are so used to just saying, yeah, I'm fine, or no problem. But what we're now looking at is real work, is getting intimate and deeper with yourself. And so from your perspective, Jules, obviously with you holding these kind of courses and workshops, what do you feel from a kind of a misconception? What's the most misunderstood thing around sex versus intimacy? Do you feel that there's something that's quite commonly said, or maybe people just assume that is something and it's not? Is there some kind of common thread that we have?
I'd like to, I noticed that you said just earlier, that you call these people out, but you'll never make it into an argument.
I give it as a response as opposed to
that's a really interesting comment, because why wouldn't you? And if I speak for myself, well, I wouldn't, because back in the days, when you said from a male perspective, there was never any discussion around emotions or feelings, and the same for me in school. So it's really, first of all, I think important to acknowledge that we all grew up in the same, and maybe it is easier accessible to women, but women have also been in this culture where no speaking up for me definitely meant I don't want to be the angry woman. I just wanted to be the cool woman. Mm-hmm. So I definitely wouldn't call anyone out or cause an argument, because I wanted to be accepted. And it's I think it's regardless of gender, it's really important for all of us to call people out, whilst also really acknowledging what are we contributing to the situation. Because we're all playing the game to a certain extent, and it's so easy to point the finger and it's you did that. It's that is okay, but also what are we contributing to it? Otherwise it just becomes this blaming culture, and that's very unhelpful really for us to evolve. In terms of your question, I think the most common is people, many, just don't know the difference, that there is a difference between sex and intimacy. And once we actually mention that, it just percolates, and it's oh yeah, oh wow, in that situation earlier, I just wanted intimacy, but I actually initiated a sexual encounter. And it's how we're in a culture that is so this hookup culture. And how would it look like? You meet on Tinder, and it's look, I really need a cuddle tonight. What would that be like? Or
a booty call for a cuddle.
Yeah,
I could definitely do that. There needs to be an app for that.
Yeah. And I think there is something connected to if we just want to cuddle, it makes us maybe weak or needy. We don't want to be needy, though we all need intimacy. We need touch for our well-being. If they made studies on toddlers, if they don't receive enough touch, they get distressed and do not feel well. So we need touch. And so touch, I think, touch is very much connected to sex, where it's like we need to learn again to touch that is not sexual, with our friends, with our family, hugging. So we actually can, like also like satisfy our need for intimacy that way. So we're not putting it all on our partner, and at the same time being clear towards ourselves and with our what do we actually need in this very moment. Yeah, and that's and to say like that applies for like men and women alike. So there's the beauty of Sex Club is really that we exchange between the genders, and it's so touching and beautiful to hear that we're all experiencing the same pressures and the same needs to varying degrees. And though we're all individual, we're not so different after all.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Josh? I don't know if you were going to say.
Yeah, I'll just on everything that's been said there. I think what a lot of men have experienced but don't know how to articulate it, and actually don't even recognize that they have experienced, is abandonment in a lot of ways. I think men, when they were young boys, a lot of young boys are abandoned by their dads. And I don't necessarily mean physically. I mean, if your dad is not emotionally available for you for whatever reason when you're a child, then you're going to have experienced abandonment. And then what men will do is they are terrified of that abandonment, but have no idea that they're terrified of that abandonment, and no idea just how much of their life is built around avoiding that abandonment. Men have the same, like Jules has said, the same sensory needs that everybody has. Men are not very good at separating their need for sensory connection without it leading to sex. And when you build on that, if they're with a partner who expresses during that sensory connection, during the kind of skin to skin cuddle, let's just cuddle tonight, then what a man experiences there is abandonment, and they're terrified of that, right? And then so they have this belief that sex, is the avoidance of that abandonment, right? This abandonment idea also goes into the WhatsApp groups. The WhatsApp groups have been the new place where men feel part of something, right? If you're in a WhatsApp group with 10, 20 people and somebody puts in a message that you want to call out, or you want to be the one that says that's not acceptable, you're likely to experience the abandonment of which you're desperately trying to run away from by being in 15 different WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
So you don't call it out. And in fact, you most of the time they're going to join in because they want to be part of that, right? And they've never had experience of being intimate with other men, by the way. When I say intimate with other men, I mean a natural relationship with a man that is loving and friendship natured. If you never experienced that with a man when you was younger, then you have no idea what it feels like anyway. And so these WhatsApp groups are literally men trying to feel part of something. And then they're caught up in this, they hear Trump say it and they think, well, that's terrible, it shouldn't be said. Then they're saying it that night at the pub because they want to be part of, they want to feel connected and feel like they're part of something. Yeah. And by the way, I'm speaking from personal experience here as well, as a man myself who can sit here in this space, in this conversation, and be very, say what we're talking about, be very connected to it. But I play football on a Saturday and you stick me in the changing rooms with 15 other blokes, and I wouldn't want you to view the way in which I act, right? So I have to get real honest about that, right? And recognize my need to be part of, and my fear of abandonment in any given situation. I'd like to think that I'm reaching a stage where, the guys that I play football with visibly see what I do online. So there's an idea there. But I certainly can't sit in this conversation and say, if that came in a WhatsApp group, I'm going to be the one person out of the 50 that says, I don't think that's acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's your honesty. And that's the intimacy that you're creating on the call now as well, is that you are being open and intimate and honest with, yourself in that situation. And we do tend to go with the herd, and we tend to go, oh yeah, if you're not going to put your hand up and say anything, then keep it quiet. And I personally have been one of the people that usually always doesn't go with the herd. And that has seen me, I'm very, I say exactly what I think. I'm Northern, and I had military parents. It was said, it was done. It was, you just say whatever you need to say. But I didn't know how to say things sometimes. So my delivery was off, and that would alienate people. And then that would be really hard for me to understand how, what have I done wrong? I've just said the truth, but not everybody wants to hear the truth. Even if you deliver it on a delicate little cushion and you give them a cuddle, a lot of people aren't ready for their truth, or they don't want to look at it. So it's not just about knowing that something's wrong. It's also knowing how to share with someone else what it is you're feeling in that moment and your perspective on something, which requires an awful lot of confidence. And if you have only just established the confidence to think that it's out of alignment, the words aren't necessarily there straight away after you. And this is why I feel it's important for us to kind of create a universal language, which is what I'm doing with I Am Sound, which is actually using the words that we use for sound within the words that way that we communicate with people. So distortion and harmony, and looking how we resonate and the frequencies. And it's adopting these words more and more so we can explain how we truly feel, because everyone understands music and they get it when you start learning about it. But I feel that there's for me especially as well, I've been in so many situations in my life where I've kissed a guy and I've wanted to get lost in the kiss, and then it's like the hand's there and then move my hand to the dick and you're like, oh God, I don't want to go there. If I wanted to go there, I'm fully aware that it's there, and I would definitely go if I wanted to. And it's just, I just think, give me time, allow me to do that myself. Or sometimes I just want to get lost in a cuddle. I don't want to have to then kiss and have to have sex and it lead to somewhere. So I've experienced that quite a lot. And I'm now able to say, no, I'll go there when I'm ready. Thank you. And then they're, oh, okay. And I don't say it in a horrible way, but it's taken me so long to establish the confidence just to say no. And even when I'm talking to people, I ask more questions, because in the beginning, I wanted to ask more questions and have a general conversation. It was like I was interviewing them. So that nobody's going to want to have sex, because I didn't know how to deliver my questions either. Because I was, I am an interviewer, I am a presenter, but I would then interview them because I was so nervous. I wouldn't be just generally asking them conversations. And when you ask someone a question from a space of anxiety and frustration, you can tend to go into like the therapist or the presenter or the someone that's unattached to the moment that's happening, which can also be quite distancing. So Jules, I'll ask you this question. Have you personally figured out a way within yourself to be able to say no to sex, and obviously with intimacy being a bit more in that area? Have you, and how long did it take you to find the confidence for that, and what kind of experience did you go through in order to get there?
Yeah, I definitely have found the confidence, and it was quite a journey. There's like lots of workshops and therapy as well, but really it's like it was about like practicing it with other people. So very much like workshops similar to sex club consent workshops, where I can get to practice actually saying no, receiving a no as well. It's really both. If I say a no, am I also ready to receive a no? And receiving a no for me, it's really to frame it like, if someone says no to me, it takes courage to say no.
Yes.
And then I can trust them that when they say yes, they really mean it.
You mean it, yeah.
Because one of my
insecurities... I got goosebumps then when you said that. I was just like, that moment, I know exactly what you mean. Carry on.
Because when someone, like one of my insecurity is like when there's something going on, I wonder, do they really want it? So some people say like, oh, when there's like too much words into an interaction, it takes the sexiness out. It's like, actually, if someone really confirms that they're in for it, or they're not, that is just makes the encounter very pure. Mm-hmm. It takes out a lot of worries that we may have. Mm-hmm. So I would say the confidence to say no. And it really took me, like, I went to workshops, like, great, like next encounter, I can do it. It's so high stakes. Yeah. And like my fears of rejection are so deep that often it still didn't work. Mm-hmm. And to really have this like patience with oneself to go through. Because often what you said, like, there's an encounter and it goes from kissing straight onto like oral sex, and suddenly, whoa, penetrative sex straight from A to B. It's really interesting. And I figured, like, why am I doing it? And it's because it was my comfort zone. It was this template that I knew how to do.
Yeah.
Versus like, if I slow things down, suddenly, whoa, there are unknown factors. What are we talking about? Maybe like I spend 15 minutes on someone's ear, and like all of these things, and does the other person want that? And that then requires communication, and it becomes deep and pleasurable and also scary.
Very.
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience, and I didn't know what to do in the moment, and it was probably the beginning of the year, and I basically connected with this guy. And I have this thing where it's always a connection. It's not a relationship until there's like real commitment and stuff. So I have connections with guys, but I won't kind of open up fully until I kind of like go through a few little hurdles, shall we say, within myself, not within them. And I'd kind of reached all my hurdles. I'd like, okay, yeah, I'm up for this. And we ended up, I said to him, I don't want to have sex straight away. He's like, no, it's fine. Let's get to know each other. I said, okay, cool. So it was all fine. And then we were playing around, and we were doing something, and he got off and I didn't. And then the following night I stayed again, and same thing again. He got off and I didn't, in the same way. The third night comes round and he's like going to do the same thing again. I'm like, I'm not going to repeat what I did for the last 2 nights. I really can't. I need more than that. Is that I don't want to offend you, but like that. And he just literally just pushed me back and was just like, oh my God, are you okay? And he's like, I've just realized I've been on repeat my whole life.
Wow.
He was just like, wow. So then he sat up, and then what he started talking about his ex-wife and the sex that they had and the way that they went through it, and that he'd have to get loads of gear in just so she would have sex with him, and it would always be the same routine. And he literally was breaking down on the bed, and I'm sat there going, so we're not having sex. Okay, let's just talk. And I'm thinking, right. But it needed that realization was, I'm not going to do this the third night in a row, because A, I'm not getting anything out of it. B, it's the same. And C, like, there's no communication. This is like a little ritual that we've just created, that we're not going to do that. But it was so hard for me to go, because I would have said it on the second night, but I thought, okay, it's fine, because I was enjoying myself, I was there and present. But the third night, I'm like, no, got to say no. But it's so hard for me to go, we're not going to do that. I'm not taking part if it's going to be the same. But it's that confidence that you do really need to have in yourself to just say no with love. And it way that it's not no completely, it's just a no, not in that way, or it's a no, not right now, but it might be in 7 minutes. I could be up for it, but right now you've just got to give it that space in your feeling right in that moment. What is it? Is it okay or is it not? So it can be quite difficult.
There's a certain magic that you're speaking about here, that if we just make this leap of faith and be honest what we're feeling right now, often it completely disarms the other person and takes down their guard, because we've just exposed a part of of ourselves. And often it is mirrored with the other person feeling safe then to also let their guards down. It doesn't work always, but I've seen it work so many times. So I really can recommend, like, it's always worth it to make this leap. And just out of curiosity, what would happen if I'm just honest in this very moment?
Yeah. You never know what's coming. You never know what's, and for him, obviously, I wasn't expecting a full therapy session, but that's what needed to come in that moment. And that actually worked out getting us more intimate and more close than sex would have done.
Yeah.
I'm sure, because I then understood everything. So then after that, we decided that we weren't going to have sex until he was ready, because he didn't feel confident to do so. He said, I don't know what to do. I feel like I've got a routine, and that's out the window. I don't even know how to have sex with you. Can we not have sex? I was like, that's fine. It's okay. But that really created better friendship. And it's that honesty. And he's a fully grown, like rugby kind of guy. He'd never experienced that before. And that really shook him up, but it also shifted him so much. He started journaling after that every morning. He was getting up, he was going with his feelings, and just because I said no, you don't know what the transformation can come. And I think that's really important. So Josh, obviously you just dashed off then, but we were just talking obviously about this. You get the general.
I was scared. I ran away. It's getting too much. I'm checking out here.
So with you then, in terms of kind of sexual encounters and experiences, have you ever been in a situation where you've actually said no to a woman in a certain way? Have you ever said no?
Probably not. Probably not.
Have you felt like saying no, but haven't?
I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I don't think. And I guess this is probably some of where the culture, right? That's again. I'm generally speaking, but certainly in the society, let's say mainstream society, is that if you get yourself into that position that you've just talked about, then I'll say it as it would. I would see it would be at society level. Then you're fair game anyway. And what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Why are we even here if you're not on that?
Yeah.
Right. And so I grew up in that culture. Yeah. And it's a hugely problematic culture. But again, I think it's very much linked to from a man's perspective, the kind of the sex part is just a need being met, and they have no idea, because that's slowing down what you talked about, and it opened him up in the way that it did, is because it's men, particularly men. I think it's true of humans, but we have this avoid being present at all costs because being present is too frightening. Certainly in close, intense situations. Now we're going to bring up all of this inner child. The wounded inner child's going to come out in those moments. Because now he's terrified of rejection. He's terrified of getting it right. He's terrified of not being accepted, terrified of all of these different things. Right. So, that kind of, I'm going to go with the process that I've always known. And I'm, literally going to tune out until at the end. Listen, the guy that you're talking about, I think that would probably be true for way over 90% of men. Before any kind of healing journey, right? And I think, look, if we say that my healing journey's been sort of 8 years, and within that 8 years, I've met my wife very early on. I've kind of only ever lived in the old space, and the old space was sex was just another one of my drugs. And so if I could get my hands on it, I'd get my hands on it. That's the truth. Until things change.
It's very thank you so much for sharing that, because and then being honest that like you haven't said no, because in sex club it's very, very often shared. There's this common perception that women often don't say no, and then they just go along, but actually it's just as common for men, because there is this like stereotype that men always want sex. And that's kind of like this like weight, like a lot of them are dealing with. So they don't dare to say no because they feel like they need to live up to this, like, of course I want sex, so I give it now. And I couldn't be possibly saying I don't want sex with you right now.
And by the way, it would be, in men, in again, I'm talking general society, men's circles, if you were out in a group of, let's say you were out in a group of 5 or 10 of you, and one of the group went back with a woman the night before, the next morning the first question is, did you do it? And by the way, if the answer is no, then you better have a reason why. And that's that is the extent of the conversation in general men's circles. There's no, and I'm talking at a sort of top societal level here now. I know there's lots of men that are living in different spaces to that. But that was the space in which I grew up in until my life changed when it did. That was the space that I existed in. Right. So, you can get into the murky waters of, at what point do we draw the line when men are literally saying whatever they think they need to say in order to make sure that it happens? When does that manipulation, by the way, become some sort of exploitation anyway, in and of itself? You know what I'm talking about. So So, you know, but I think for a lot of men, that's the circles in which they grow up in. That's the knowledge that they have.
It's quite limiting, yeah. Because I know that, you know, using that example again, I mean, I'm quite aware of a number of things. I'm never going to be fully aware of everything because that's not the nature of who we are. But I could help him continue that journey and have those conversations ongoing. And, you know, to the point where he actually said, you know, I've never lived in my truth as much as when I've been hanging around with you. And he said, I feel like I've been in therapy. He said, I've been in therapy for like since 2015. And my experience of being in therapy, I get that truthfulness like an hour a week. He said, hanging around with you, it was so intense. I feel like I've done therapies in the last 2 weeks. And he said, not in a bad way. He says, but I've never been here before. So I said, well, maybe start talking to some of your friends in the same way and see if there's any way that you could, rather than doing it with me, because I want to be your girlfriend, not your therapist. So like, can we separate that in the nicest way? And can you see if there's anyone else? He's like, there is no one that. No, I don't know anyone that would talk to me about that. And I was like, I think you need to try. So then he tried with one of his friends and was so shocked that they went on this other long, it was like a 3-hour WhatsApp call that they ended up having this amazing like, other conversation. And it's because his mind was so shut thinking there isn't anyone. And I'm like, there is so many people go through this. If you have the, you know, enough in you to be able to open up the conversation, my God, that conversation can come back in abundance. You could change someone's life just by saying, you don't have to say, oh, is anyone out there that's got this? You can just say, well, I had this experience. Anybody else had that? Just a general question. It's just the way you frame it. There will be someone out there that wants to talk about how they feel too, because it's so rare, unfortunately, to talk about your feelings at like you said, at top level. There are groups out there doing more discussions. But Josh, you also, and Jules, I'm guessing that you'll have had quite a few corporate types in your events and stuff as well. And what I mean by corporate type is somebody that is just very focused on and driven on their career, isn't that much focused on kind of community and social aspects and so on, just, you know, drinking of a weekend and, you know, that kind of same waking up at the same time every day, doing the same kind of things, not the entrepreneurial kind of people that we're talking about. But when they're in that sector of a corporate environment, and either one of you can answer this question, do you feel that it's right or wrong to bring the intimacy that we're talking about today into that corporate environment in a workspace? Or do you think that should be something that's completely separate from their work environment? Because there's some people saying that wellness is too wellness for work environment, and some people are saying that there's not enough of it. So where do you both stand on the kind of intimacy in the workspace? Whoever wants to answer first.
Yeah, so I used to work in the corporate industry for 10 years. So I have a real deep experience of like what that felt like, and that I'm a complete different person when I go to my workplace. And the energy that actually that takes to pretend who I am there versus like who I'm at home is unbelievable. How much energy it like really takes away. And I can promise you that like all of us, subconsciously or consciously, are longing to like be ourselves, because it's just exhausting to like keep this front up. And it's just, I guess, yeah, in terms of, there was a point where I was already on this journey of self-development, and then I came to the workplace and I'm like, I can't handle being inauthentic anymore. And I would just slowly start answering questions a little bit more honest, like how I'm feeling or what I'm doing, and really gently. And again, it's just been met with this like real curiosity. And because as soon as someone breaks the mold, people are, what's going on there? And that's really beautiful. And rather than me also wanting to change them, it was more like, I need to be myself. I think that's also a big difference, rather than going in there and trying to missionary people into like, you need to be vulnerable right now. It's more like,
vulnerability training at 3 o'clock. You're like, what? Doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that, by the way. I actually think there's I don't know if you use this word, Jules, but a yearning. I think you used something similar. There is a yearning in people to be able to reconnect with themselves and be who they are. You don't awaken that in somebody by going in and saying you should be vulnerable and you should become who you are. You do that by going in and being yourself. And when I be myself, I give permission to other people to be themselves. I create that space, right? I remember, this is kind of an adage that would kind of help explain it. I remember, now I know we connected on LinkedIn. When I first went on LinkedIn a couple of years ago, after a year or two of setting up the work that I do, a lot of people said to me, you've got to remember that LinkedIn's a professional thing. So you can't do what you can't do some of the work that you're doing. And so I was on there, I was like, all right, I was being like this sort of corporate version of myself, right? And really wasn't resonating, because I wasn't being who I am, right? So I kind of lost everything that I was about. And then I remember I posted on there after about 6 months, this post about how I used to be a drunk and all this kind of stuff. And it was just me being straight, exactly who I am. And the post blew up, right? It got viewed like over 5 million times, right? And it was at that moment I was like, why didn't I listen to my heart and my gut that was telling me that this is what people want? And I think the reason I get to do a lot of the work that I do in the corporate environment is because I'm going in and I'm saying, look, let's get real for a moment, right? Here's me being real. I start off any of the work that I do by laying myself on the table and saying, here's who I am. I might be coming, I wouldn't even call myself an expert. I'm somebody who's good at communicating and articulating some of the things that I've been through, in hope that you might be able to articulate some of the things that you've been through. And I think, from a man's perspective, there's so much talk about how men won't talk, and that's just not true. My experience has been, when I open up, I can't shut men up in front of me. I cannot shut them up because they are crying out for that space. The problem is the space has never been there. We haven't done enough as people to create those spaces, not just for men. I think that's true for everyone. We float about saying to everyone needs to talk more, but we're not giving them the space to do that, right? Yeah. And so, my experience in the corporate environment has been that the corporate environment is desperate for this kind of work. But I would caveat that by saying, building on what Jules said, you can't go in there in this missionary way of trying to change people, because that doesn't work. And we've got to understand as well that a lot of people are carrying their own shame in their own way, right? And just because I'm in a place where I'm able to kind of express exactly how I'm feeling, forcing somebody to do that when they've never even articulated a sentence is just as problematic as trying to get them to keep it to themselves. So there has to be a process and a way of creating that space.
Totally. Jules, did you want to say something on that? I don't know, you looked.
Yeah, very much agree with you. And I think for people to access this, so anyone is watching and think like, where are these spaces? I really recommend my business partner in Sex Club, my co-lead, Conor Gregg. He's doing a men's course over 5 weeks. He's doing that regularly, starting, I think, in like 2 weeks time. You can find it on dandelion.earth. And also, really joining our next Sex Club course, which is like very much about the intimacy, how to be more real within sexual situations. Because actually we haven't even begun to scratch the surface, like what we can feel during sex and how we can really connect during sex. And when we really come from a place of like vulnerability and connection, and even if it's just for one night, that is a whole different level of, I think, pleasure and connection and just being ourselves that we can really reach there.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And, creating the space for these conversations. There are so many brands, amazing people out there. I've met Conor as well. There's incredible people out there that are opening up these spaces. My friend Adam is also one. He has Plight Club, and that's his t-shirt. There you go, you can see it. But he also has this connection clothing idea that if you're wearing a t-shirt like this, you're open for a conversation, and that's the whole thing. So that's the essence behind his brand. And if you do want to get one, you can. I am Sound is the code. If you go there, if you want to get one of these t-shirts, you get a discount as well. But I feel that for me personally, with LinkedIn, I did a post just yesterday. I asked them if I could have a live platform, because obviously we don't have any other social media, and I won't for my mental health. It's a flat no. But I do have a YouTube channel, and I thought about having a LinkedIn presence with a live LinkedIn space. And as part of their rules, you have to keep posting content for like 5 or 6 weeks until they go through and look at the application and then see if how your content's performing. And I'm like, that's out of alignment with who I truly am. I don't want to keep posting content for the sake that they're going to say yes, that I can have a live platform in a few weeks' time, because I don't want to do that. It's like me waking up and just saying, oh, I need to post it today just so they like me. It's not who I am. And whether it means I can't have that live platform, that's okay. But I do feel, I had thought about it. My content, I mean, the names of some of the shows that I've got are extremely raw. You know, we've got slut shaming, we've got wrap it before you tap it, we've got all these like scenarios that are grabbing headlines that get people going, oh, I want to listen to that. But to be seen in a corporate workspace, some people might be like, oh, I don't want that. But I'm not here to fit in with everyone else around me. I'm here to fit in with who I want to be, and that is in itself a struggle enough. And I want to make sure that, you know, my brand is focused to help other people. And it just so happens that the best way I help other people is when I'm raw. Sometimes I swear. I'm just so like out there with what I talk about, and other people go, oh my God, we have awkward conversations all the time. And that's the essence of who I am, and it's the essence of the brand. And putting that on LinkedIn is slightly scary, because I might get some people going, oh, this is not the right place. But at the same time, if you don't like it, scroll. There is a scroll button for a reason. Scroll thing, you just keep scrolling, just keep going on by. It's like, that's it, in the nicest way, just keep waving on by. And that's the answer to nearly 99% of the problems on social media, is just to scroll, keep going. But nobody goes there, they stop. But it's just the one thing that you keep scrolling. But yes, it doesn't, unfortunately. So we are at the end of our show today. And I just want to say thank you so much for both of you being, even before we came on the call and I was doing notes in the background, you two were having the most vulnerable conversation and just being totally honest with who you truly are. And for me, that is, you know, that's what it's all about. And bringing people on like you guys really does help. So can we, just before we go, so obviously Jules, you just mentioned in your stuff's below, but about where people can find you, what's the dates for your next course, just before we go?
The next course starts on 6th October, which is sold out though, so the 17th November is the next one.
Amazing. And is that an online version or is it an in-person one?
It's online, yeah.
Brilliant. And then Josh, your stuff, where can we find more about you?
The best place to go is my website, which is joshconnolly.co.uk. All my sort of social links are there. My YouTube channel, my Instagram and stuff, LinkedIn. I put a lot of sort of content out. So yeah,
Incredible.
That's the best place to find me.
Thank you so much for that. And if anybody wants to check out more about I Am Sound, I've got a little sexy banner here. So it's iamsoundacademy.com, and you can find out much more about what we're doing with the Talkwards. And in November, just to plug, we've got on a new sponsor partner. So Pioneer DJ Equipment, they have now sponsored us for the whole of November. We're doing some content with them, and it's all to do with men's health. So I called it mental health, with men, capital MEN. And we are going deep down the rabbit hole on the Conscious Men series and everything else surrounding it. So it's a real kind of big, strong month, which I want both of you on. I haven't told you both about this yet, but having you back. But yeah, so, and then for the rest of the day, what day are we on today? It's Wednesday. So if I remember rightly, bear with me just 1 second. I should actually know what's going on for the rest of the radio today, but I think we've got Claptone on later this afternoon. We've got Roger Sanchez on the radio. We have yes, Martin Garrix as well later on today. I should know the schedule considering I set it, but I should have known to switch up. I shouldn't know, but anyway. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please do share this with your friends. If you've got any questions, send them in to us. We're happy to answer, and I'll pass these things around. We do have a comment, actually. Adam's saying, Plight Club saying, well done. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, I hope you enjoy your days, and we will see you again soon.